Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching our presentation about the usability of playbook frameworks. So to jump right in, playbooks at their core are really just a series of step-by-step instructions that allow incident responders to gain momentum during stressful situations, whether a security system, organization, a network has been compromised, breached. These are the first steps that a security professional are going to follow to identify the risk, quarantine it, and mitigate it. So playbook frameworks are actually the guidelines that allow technicians to then create and implement the playbooks within their own environments. So across industry, playbooks and their frameworks are in use, they're adopted, they're popular, but really the usability is unmeasured. And so what we wanted to do in our study was to look at it in two different parts. First, ask a series of individuals that deal with security day in and day out to use a framework, build playbooks based off of common scenarios they'd likely encounter in their day jobs. And then in the second part is we actually use the playbooks that we developed during a series of no-notice cyber attacks on a network and see how useful or not useful the playbooks are at dealing with a threat. So in the first study, we recruited 12 participants and gave a series of instructions on how to use two popular frameworks. We then asked them to design playbooks for two scenarios, the first of which is brute force attacks, trying to guess the username and password to gain unauthorized access to a system. And the second one is valid credential misuse, where you have a username and password already, and you attempt to gain access to it, but you're not supposed to. And so based off these 24 playbooks, we exported those to a series of industry professionals that are, for many cases, chief information security officers at major organizations, and asked them to evaluate would the playbooks that were developed actually work within their own security environments. If so, why? If not, why not? So some of the feedback that we got from this study, we saw that many of the participants that we had recruited appreciated the proactive nature of sitting down, thinking about problems, and coming up with solutions before they had to do it on the fly. Additionally, many of them noted that playbooks were easy to learn. However, despite being easy to learn, many of the playbooks that were produced were deemed insufficient by our expert panel. The most common feedback that we got from our experts were that incident response in itself is not linear. You need to have robust plans that account for various paths that an incident response event may take. Additionally, let's say there's an inexperienced individual that's supposed to complete a task. Or let's say it's just a really stressful situation and they cannot recall how to complete a task. Having playbooks with enough detail to prompt that to overcome that obstacle was a key recommendation of our experts. So after looking at the 24 playbooks that were produced in the first study, we selected the best playbooks and adopted them in a real security operations center. And then we gave them to the professionals that work there and asked them to use them during a series of 3 no-notice attacks on their networks that were conducted by a trusted insider. So what we found, of the 5 participants that we used throughout this study, 2 of the more seasoned professionals said that the playbooks were nice, but they really relied more heavily on their past experience when dealing with particular problems at hand. Additionally, some of the more junior technicians identified that when they were stressed, they found themselves fumbling through the playbooks, that there really wasn't a comfort level there, and that they were losing their place, they were going page to page, and we understood that there was a key gap between novice individuals and more experienced individuals. So after 2 iterations of a no-notice attack on the same organization, we did a pause. And we identified where individuals were failing to identify problems, quarantine it, and mitigate it. And we implemented a series of revamp measures. I think the most important one that was conducted was assigning seasoned mentors to novice technicians and having them coach them through on a regular basis how to use the playbooks, the ins and outs of them. And so if you have 30 minutes during lunch, sitting down, talking through it, and so that when you had to go do it in real life, they were more comfortable with it. One interesting thing to note was during the 3rd no-notice event attack that we had conducted, one of the employees was brand new. She had onboarded using the playbooks, and she said that she was actually confident in her ability to identify the problems and to come up with a solution because the playbooks helped her understand what her role was in the organization. And she also felt empowered on how to effectively communicate with her peers and her supervisors during the event to keep everyone informed on what was happening. So there are numerous recommendations that we have in the paper, which I highly recommend you go read. But in short, jumping to the key findings, what we found were playbooks and their frameworks were useful, but not in isolation. There had to be a number of additional organizational reinforcements that had to take place for them to be effective in our observations. And so what this means is, for your organization, you may or may not have any success at all just going to download a playbook off the internet and saying, today we're going to use this playbook for incident response. There's a series of tailors that need to be made or tailoring to make it more in line with your organization's behaviors and practices. Additionally, taking the time for training and resources is a must. And additionally, identify where the other gaps might be. Are there any policy or legal hurdles that are in play preventing your technicians from having a successful response to these type of events? So looking at it holistically, playbooks can help, but they're not going to help by themselves. So with that, if there are any questions or comments, I would love for you to reach out, and I really appreciate you all watching this presentation. Thank you.